Picture this. You're walking through Rome's filthiest pleasure district, the Subura, where the streets reek of cheap wine, sweat, and sin. You pass brothels with creaking doors and laughing men, when suddenly your eyes land on a woman whose face you recognize. Your stomach drops. Beneath the smudged makeup and cheap perfume isn't some nameless prostitute. It's Valeria Messalina, the Empress of Rome herself, wife of Emperor Claudius, working a brothel room like a common street girl. And the worst part? She's not there because she has to be. She's there because she wants to be. Messalina isn't a desperate woman forced into this life. She's the most powerful woman in the empire, sneaking out of the palace at night to challenge Rome's prostitutes in contests of sheer sexual endurance. And if you think Roman decadence begins and ends with Caligula, what you're about to hear will make Caligula look like a shy altar boy. Because Messalina didn't just misuse her power, she weaponized her sexuality in ways that shook the empire to its core and sealed her own horrific end. The year was 38 CE, and Rome was buzzing with celebration. Marble temples were draped in laurels, streets swept clean, flowers floating on the Tiber. A wedding had united Emperor Claudius with the dazzling young Valeria Messalina. She was barely 15, a girl by modern standards, but in Roman eyes, she was the perfect empress. Her family name traced back to the earliest days of the Republic. Her skin was pale as polished marble, her hair a golden cascade in the sunlight, her features sculpted like the statues of Venus in the Forum. Claudius, 13 years older, walked with an uneven gait, his body marked by tremors and stiffness, likely cerebral palsy. But what he lacked in grace, he made up for in intellect. And now he had something more. A wife who embodied everything Rome valued: nobility, fertility, and divine bloodlines. In public, Messalina was perfection. She bore him 2 children, attended state events with serene poise, and moved through religious ceremonies with measured dignity. To the people, she was the image of imperial virtue. But appearances in Rome were masks, and Messalina's mask was hiding a hunger that would soon become unstoppable. It began as faint ripples and palace gossip. Servants whispered about the Empress dismissing her guards late at night. They noticed her slipping into plain tunics and coarse cloaks, garments that clashed violently with her usual silks and jewels. At first, it seemed like the harmless rebellion of a bored young woman trapped in imperial protocol. But those who followed her found she wasn't wandering Rome's elegant streets. She was descending into her rotting underbelly, the Subura. The Subura was a tangle of narrow alleys and cheap taverns. The air stank of spilled wine, cooking oil, and human waste. Oil lamps flickered over red-painted brothel doors, where women lounged in thresholds, calling to passing men. Messalina didn't just walk through. She studied. She watched how prostitutes tilted their heads, how they touched a man's arm just enough to hook him, how they bargained over price and time. She memorized faces, routines, and the hierarchy of Rome's sex trade, from street girls to high-priced courtesans with wealthy patrons. This wasn't idle curiosity, it was preparation. The first fall came during Saturnalia in 40 CE. Saturnalia was chaos incarnate. Masters served slaves, rules dissolved, and drunken chants echoed through the city until dawn. People wore masks, trade clothes, and gorged themselves on food and sin. While Claudius led the official rites, Messalina slipped away.
Dressed as a commoner, her golden hair hidden beneath a dark wig, Messalina approached a brothel whose door hung half open, spilling warm light and the scent of incense onto the street. The keeper, a sharp-eyed man with gold rings and the face of someone who'd seen every kind of depravity, sized her up. She offered herself for the night, no pay required. Thinking she was some bored aristocrat chasing a thrill, he agreed. What happened next left the women whispering for months. Messalina didn't just work, she dominated, one man after another, without pause, without fatigue. The other women began to retreat, slipping away to rest. Messalina stayed. When the brothel keeper told her the night was over, she demanded more clients. Only when the streets had emptied and no man remained did she finally leave her disguise damp with sweat, her face glowing not with shame, but with triumph. In the months that followed, her outings became military-grade operations. A team of loyal servants smuggled her out of the palace under layers of disguise wigs, soot-smeared cheeks, coarse wool dresses. She invented names, false backgrounds, passed from one brothel to another. Then she raised the stakes. Competitions. Messalina challenged Rome's most famous courtesans to see who could take the most men in a single night. The prizes weren't just gold, they were bragging rights in a city where reputation mattered more than breadth. The most infamous took place in 41 CE. Her rival was Calla, a courtesan so skilled she was courted by senators. The venue, a private house lit by hundreds of lamps, packed with Rome's elite. Wine flowed like water. Dice clattered as bets were placed. Calla paced herself, reaching 25 clients before declaring herself done. The crowd cheered until they saw Messalina still working. She passed 30. Only when no man remained did she stop. The laughter died. Men looked at one another in disbelief. They hadn't just watched a contest. They'd watched the emperor's wife shatter every boundary of Roman decency and do it without shame. By 42 CE, Messalina's ambitions had shifted. It was no longer about pleasure, it was about control. She established a luxury brothel in a villa near the Campus Martius. The decor was opulent marble floors, silk curtains, gold-plated oil lamps. But the women weren't street girls. They were noble-born wives and daughters, blackmailed into service under threats to their family's honor and fortunes. The clients? Rome's most powerful men, senators, generals, merchants with influence in the grain trade. And every whispered word, every act of humiliation was recorded by Messalina's hidden spies. She could destroy any man who entered, and she knew it. By 44 CE, secrecy bored her. She began staging public orgies disguised as religious festivals. Invitations were sent to senators, their wives, their sons and daughters, all under the pretense of honoring the gods. The gatherings began solemnly, with hymns and offerings at the altar, but soon wine was poured, clothes loosened, and the ceremonies dissolved into frenzy. People who thought they were attending a pious event found themselves trapped in a performance of degradation they could never admit to. It was genius blackmail. The shame was a leash Messalina could pull at will. Then, in 48 CE, she committed the act that even Rome could not forgive. With Claudius away in Ostia, Messalina held a full legal wedding to her lover, the young and handsome senator Gaius Silius. It was public, witnessed, and binding under Roman law. She wore the bridal veil, offered sacrifices, and signed the marriage contracts. She called herself his Empress, issued orders in his name, and spoke as though Claudius had already been replaced. When Claudius learned the truth, he dismissed it as absurd until the evidence flooded in. He rode back to Rome with troops, finding Messalina in the palace gardens, still celebrating. Witnesses say her face drained of color as she realized the game was over. Her execution was swift. Her name was erased from monuments, her statues were destroyed, her memory condemned by law. The woman who ruled Rome through lust had been erased from its story.